What's the biggest bullet you've dodged in your life? I was born in 1986 in Houston, Texas. My parents both served in the armed forces, and my father met my mother because he was her drill instructor. While she was in basic training, a guy forced himself on her, and that guy disappeared. My dad pulled some strings to make sure she could graduate. He signed the birth certificate and accepted this kid as his own. They liked to party and have fun, which is why I guess they got along. My mom struggled with depression growing up, which I later found out was because she was a product of forced intimacy. Fast forward, Dad is out at work. My mom calls him, asks if he needs anything from the supermarket, tells him the neighbors are watching the kids while she shops, says, "Love you," and hangs up. Then she walks into the closet, puts a firearm to her chest, and ends her life. The neighbor, who was watching us, heard the shot, found her, and called my dad and 911. Dad was an emotional wreck. He suddenly had 2 kids to take care of, one who wasn't biologically his, though he'd been there since her birth. Fast forward, we moved to South Carolina. My dad met a woman at work who offered to help watch us sometimes. She eventually became my stepmom. One day, a hurricane hit while Dad was on base. My stepmom, my sibling, and I took shelter in the bathtub with a mattress over us. The trailer we lived in off the military base was destroyed. The walls split, the roof was torn off, and everything was soaked. We lost everything again and had to live in hotels for a while. Fast forward, we moved to Louisiana because my dad got a new duty station. We lived way out in the boondocks, with the Red River Bayou running through our backyard, literally. The neighborhood kids were older than me, but they still let me hang out. They introduced me to cigarettes and stealing, which led to cursing and lying. I was only 7 years old. At night, my dad liked to use satellite reception to watch an illegal TV channel that showed adult content. One night, I hid under the dining room table, planning to jump out and scare him before bed. Instead, I saw what he was watching on TV. It made me curious. Let's just say I didn't jump out to scare him and waited until he finished before sneaking off to bed. Fast forward, Dad caught me messing around with the neighborhood girls. I got a whooping for it. At school, it was the same thing. Getting into fights, girls wanting to experiment, and me constantly getting caught. I was always in trouble. In Louisiana, corporal punishment was legal. The assistant principal would hit you with a paddle, then send you to the principal, who'd hit you with a giant cricket bat. In the flood of 1993, we lost our house and everything in it, again. We had to stay in hotels for a while. The family was constantly stressed, and I was always grounded or punished. My stepmom did cruel things, like setting tests for me. She'd say, "You failed the test. I was going to unground you today, but since you didn't sweep the floor, you're grounded for another month." She was vindictive. I was in counseling all the time. My parents thought I was a demon child. My dad's biological father had been a coal miner in West Virginia who hurt him severely. My dad eventually ran away and was taken in by his current family. He didn't know who his real dad was or where he was. My stepmom, I think, was a good person before she met my dad, but his aggressiveness rubbed off on her. It amplified every time she looked at me, because I wasn't Catholic enough and was just a nasty boy with mental problems. The first time I threatened to run away was in Louisiana. My dad packed my little bag, drove me out to the middle of nowhere, and dropped me off near a bridge. He told me trolls lived under the bridge and coyotes were in the fields waiting to get me. Then he drove away into the night. I screamed and cried, feeling completely helpless. He later told me he parked far enough away to see me but made sure I couldn't see him. Eventually, I started walking home, and he came to pick me up. The first time I considered taking my own life wasn't exactly an attempt. In Texas, I got busted at school with a roll of quarters I'd stolen from home. A kid told on me, and the principal called my dad. My dad picked me up, took me home, and beat me with a thick belt, the worst one. He asked questions while hitting me. After the belt, he used his hand, then the wall, then the table, then the belt again. I was so hurt, both physically and emotionally. At dinner, my dad laughed about how I couldn't sit down to eat because of the pain. I couldn't sleep that night. It felt like a deep, haunting pain. That night, I went downstairs and told him I didn't want to live anymore. He went upstairs, came back with my stepmom's revolver, and handed it to me. He said, "If you want to die, you're going to do it right here in front of me." He cocked the hammer and steadied my shaking hands. He told me to put it under my chin to make sure it worked. I wanted to pull the trigger so badly, but I swear I heard my mom's voice telling me not to give up. I apologized to my dad, stopped crying, and went back to my room. Nothing changed after that, but we did move to Indiana. It was a fresh start. Luckily, the new neighborhood was full of awesome kids, like something out of The Sandlot. Most of the time, I watched them play through a broken telescope from my window, but sometimes Dad let me out to join them. If I didn't make it back on time, though, I'd get punished again. I ran away many times after that. Eventually, I joined the military. I lost everything. My career and my wife. Then my sister passed away. Then my family disowned me. Everyone thinks I mistreated my wife, But it was the other way around. That was 8 years ago. Now my ex-wife is a professional women's football player, and she served 4 years in the military after helping ruin my career.